Hello everyone, this is HHRF's Romania Dispatch, episode number 3. My name is Zsolt Moldován, I'm HHRF's representative here in Romania, and with me is Peyton Snyder. He's our Reconnect Transylvania scholarship recipient. He has been living here in Romania since last September, so he has a good insight into things what happened here in Romania. A very interesting thing and challenging thing to understand for foreigners, what is happening around the presidential elections here in Romania right now. So we are trying to delve into that question and help you with some insight.
Yeah, so to catch you guys up from where we left off back in January with our first HHRF Romania Dispatch. When we were entering 2025, we all kind of had our gaze set on the upcoming presidential elections. So if you recall, to go over this very briefly, in December of 2024, the Romanian authorities canceled the November presidential election results, citing security concerns, citing concerns more specifically that there might have been some foreign interference or illegal interference in the electoral process, supporting specifically the candidate of Kolozsvár, who won the first round of that presidential election in November. We don't have time to go over all the details for that because it really was kind of a major political crisis that took lots of really quite crazy twists and turns, I would say. So for more details on that, we'd encourage you to check out our earlier HHRF Romania dispatches. But to kind of close this story out, to bring it to a sort of conclusion, the Central Election Bureau in Romania blocked Ceausescu's candidacy for the new presidential elections on March 9th. So in their decision, they cited the same security concerns that have been raised by the Romanian intelligence agencies and Klaus Iohannis, the president, in December, as well as there have been some kind of new criminal proceedings, criminal charges launched against him because of the conduct of him and his staff in December. So on March 9th, they made that decision that he was not going to be allowed to be a candidate in the next elections. And on March 11th, the Romanian Constitutional Court, so the highest court in Romania, canceled his appeal against that decision. So this has effectively ended his presidential run.
And this meant that there was a big void in the Romanian political palette who is going to run in the far-right movement.
Exactly. So Ceausescu had been leading in all of the polls coming into the new year, enjoying around 40% of the popular vote, maybe even more in some polls. So with him being taken off the ticket, it's really changed the dynamics of the presidential election a lot. So what we're going to do here for you is kind of introduce you to the most important candidates and then kind of identify a couple dynamics and trends to kind of look at and pay attention to as we head towards those elections in May.
Ceausescu being stopped from running meant that the far-right movement had to find a candidate. At one point, there were some questions if one of those candidates they were eyeing would be allowed to run. So for that reason, they decided to gather signatures for two candidates. Here in Romania, you need 300,000 signatures in order to be running for a candidacy at the presidential elections.
Yes, so as Zsolt said, two far-right candidates came forward, sort of working together. I mean, this was a coordinated strategy on their part in case that one of them would be stricken off of the ballots or their candidacy would be canceled for some reason. This mattered especially because, well, from the right-wing perspective at this point, they see the Romanian state and the Romanian political establishment as kind of waging a sort of war against them and trying to block their political advances.
Peyton, when you are saying right-wing perspective, you have to emphasize what kind of right-wing this Romanian right-wing means. It's not the same kind of right-wing that you have in Europe or in the United States of America.
Well, this is, I would say, a populist, nationalist, a far-right milieu. Very far-right. Yeah, very far-right. Lots of flirtation with sort of nationalist figures from Romania's past and open sort of discussions within their ranks about maybe re-annexing territories that used to belong to Romania and now belong to Ukraine. So yes, this is a really extreme right, you could say, milieu. The field has really shaken up here. Zsolt and I were talking about it before we started recording here, that the main contenders back in November were Ceausescu, Lasconi, and then Ciolacu. And now basically none of those people, they're either not going to be on the ballot or they have suffered a significant loss in popularity in Lasconi's case. So really it's a completely different landscape in some ways than it was in November and December. But ultimately, the figure who emerged from all of this and who's most likely going to capitalize on a lot of the support that Georgescu built up for himself is George Simeon. So let's kind of get into some of the polls here. I know that Zsolt brought with him some of the most recent polling data. Zsolt, could you kind of walk us through, give us some of the big takeaways of what all these polls together tell us about the election?
The fight for the presidential candidacy is getting very, very heated. That's why the polling companies, polling houses are competing with each other also for bringing the latest polls. And the latest one that we have with us here is from Avantgarde. This is one of the biggest polling companies here in Romania. They came out with a poll on March 24th, and this is the latest one. So according to this poll, George Simeon is the front runner. He has 30% of the votes, but it's very important to emphasize that 42% of people declined to state their intentions. That means that this poll is representative only for 58% of the people of Romania, if you look at it like that. So Simeon has 30% of the votes. Crin Antonescu in second place at 23%. Right behind him is Nicu Șordan with 21%, and on fourth place is Victor Ponta with 14%. There is also a fifth candidate who might sway things a little bit. Her name is Elena Lasconi. We have talked about her in our previous dispatch when she was a candidate, like one of the strongest candidates, but now she's running behind.
So George Simeon is a character we've talked about before. In previous HHRF Romania dispatches and in previous releases from HHRF, because as leader of the hour since the late 2010s, he's really become kind of the biggest face, the biggest name in this far-right Romanian political milieu. Yeah, he's now really a major contender for the presidency in the 2025 elections.
Yes, and he's most probably one of those two candidates who is going to qualify for the second round of presidential elections, which are going to be held in May, beginning of May. The 4th of May is going to be the first round, and the 18th of May, the second round. For the second spot on that second round of presidential elections, there are at least two candidates who might be contenders.
Right. So I'll kind of introduce you to the other important players to keep track of here. The second one that we kind of have our eye on at HHRF is Crin Antonescu. So Crin Antonescu is the sort of unity candidate that's been put forward by the current PSD-PND-RMDS coalition government. So the government that took shape after the December 1st parliamentary elections in 2024, they have fielded a unity candidate, hoping that he wins the election. As such, he's really representing, or he's trying to get the votes of a lot of moderates and kind of centrists in the country. In that capacity, he's competing with another candidate named Nicu Șordan. So Nicu Șordan is kind of a charismatic politician from Bucharest. He's the mayor of Bucharest. He's from the USR party, which is a sort of, I guess you could say, a sort of center-left political party. But he also has a lot of support from progressives. So he's fighting for these moderate and centrist votes that Crin Antonescu is fighting for, but he also enjoys a fair amount of support from progressive.
Looking at the two candidates that you were just talking about Crin Antonescu and Nicu Șordan, we have to really emphasize that Crin Antonescu, especially from the Hungarian perspective, is our guy. Crin Antonescu is the candidate who is endorsed by the RMDS, by the Hungarian party here in Romania. That means that we have some kind of leniency towards him.
Yes, and he's made meaningful overtures towards the Hungarian community. I've seen ads on Facebook from Crin Antonescu in Hungarian. So he's done some video releases kind of appealing to them directly. So I think, that's a relationship that's positive so far.
On the other hand, Nicu Șordan also has a big following among the Hungarian, especially Hungarian youth, especially in the cities, in the towns, in the more educated layer of society, because USR has always been looked at as a moderate progressist party, and that kind of politics has appeal in Hungarian community too.
Absolutely, and I've met lots of young people who do support Nicu Șordan or are fairly enthusiastic about him. Kind of rounding out the front of the pack, though, of these major contenders for the Romanian presidency is a really interesting figure named Victor Ponta. So Victor Ponta has been active in Romanian politics in a very major way for really more than 15 years at this point. He previously served as prime minister from 2012 to 2015. In 2014, he ran for the presidency against Klaus Johannes. He lost that election, but still won a huge chunk of the vote. And he had also previously served as the president, the leader of the PSD, the dominant political party in Romanian politics since the 1990s. So he is a really interesting figure to look at because he's entering the race kind of last minute and will basically be able to peel off some votes from the other moderate candidates we introduced and potentially from some of the kind of more rural populist areas that are kind of leaning more far right these days.
Yes, and it's a big dilemma for the PSD voters who they are going to listen to. Are they going to listen to the current leadership of the party, which endorses Crin Antonescu, who used to be the Liberal Party's president, or are they going to endorse and vote for a former PSD prime minister and party president? And Victor Ponta is appealing, as Peyton said, to many rural PSD voters, and that's why in the polls he's polling quite strong.
With Simeon enjoying this surge of support due to the endorsement he got from Georgescu, the kind of passion of that right-wing base being really ignited by all of the political intrigue that's unfolded here over the last couple months. He's going to be a much more powerful contender this time around than he was in November and December. But another really important figure to look at here is Victor Ponta. So as the former PSD leader, as Zsolt has alluded to, he's going to peel off a significant number of votes from that base. There's been some interesting reporting behind the scenes that Antonescu, who's nominally endorsed by the PSD, is really quite frustrated with that party. He feels that they're not doing enough to support him. And in actuality, it seems that a decent chunk of the PSD establishment is sort of quietly aligning itself with Victor Ponta's candidacy. At the same time, Ponta's making overtures to rural voters and a lot of the same sort of constituents that the populist right has been recruiting lately.
We have some data from another polling company, from Atlas Intel, it's the name of the polling company, who also asked questions about who Călin Georgescu's former voters are voting right now. And 79% of Călin Georgescu's voters are going with Simeon, and 5.7% of voters are going with Ponta. So that means that the majority of people who voted for Călin Georgescu in the previous elections really listened to their champion because Călin Georgescu endorsed George Simeon. So that means that the majority of the far-right votes are going to George Simeon.
Absolutely. At the same time, he is trying to make overtures with that crowd. So curiously, he's been posting some pictures on social media. In January, he visited Mar-a-Lago, took a photo with President Trump, hoping that some of his aura maybe would extend to him here in Romania. And he also met with Donald Trump's son, Don Jr., in Belgrade, in Serbia, a couple weeks ago. And he's posted pictures as well where he's wearing the sort of iconic red MAGA hats that Trump and his supporters wear in the United States. So he's kind of hoping that some of the enthusiasm for Trump and the recognition here that a lot of people have of him being a really important figure in global politics, he's hoping that by attaching himself a little bit to that movement that he can get some support here. A
month away from the first round of presidential elections, I would assume that the first spot at those elections is going to go with George Simeon. Mm-hmm. So the big question is, who is going to take the very important second spot?
Right. The first round of the election just decides what the second round is going to look like, which two candidates will advance to the second round. It's very different from the American system in that respect, because you have to consider all the different possible configurations that could go into that second round. Some candidates will perform much better against Simeon. Some candidates will perform worse against Simeon. Having kind of set the stage for what the electoral landscape is looking like here right now, here at HHRF, we kind of want to point out a couple factors and dynamics that we're paying particular attention to. We consider the situation of the Hungarian minority.
From the Hungarian perspective, the very important thing is that their candidate, Crin Antonescu, qualifies for the second round and very importantly wins the second round of the presidential votes, because as we already said previously and now also, RMDS, the party representing the Hungarian community, is in government right now with PSD and PNL. And party president Kelemen Hunor has emphasized a couple of times in recent weeks that if Crin Antonescu doesn't win the presidential elections and he's not voted as the president of Romania for the next 5 years, that would jeopardize the current government coalition's future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's indicated that NMBS would most likely withdraw from that coalition.
And that would mean the end of the government, yeah.
Right, and a new government would have to be formed at that point. So a lot of Romanian politicians and political commentators are also viewing this presidential election now as a sort of a vote of confidence in the current parliamentary government. So really, it could have even further political implications than is immediately obvious with just being the presidency. And then lastly, to kind of cap everything off here, a concerning trend that we've noticed for several years at HHRF, I think is fair to say, is just the rise of this far-right milieu that we've talked about earlier. Georgia Simeon has made very hostile statements and taken place in some clashes against Hungarians.
At the Uzvölgye cemetery a couple of years ago, when it was a really actual physical clash with the Hungarian community leaders and community members, and he was actively participating. So that was one of the moments when he rose to the forefront of the far-right movement here in Romania. And his past is very spotty, is very dark from the Hungarian perspective. So that would be like the worst-case scenario that he wins the Romanian presidency.
Yeah, the fact that he's a major contender for the presidency and really that this milieu that's kind of behind him, that's kind of brought him to this position, is more angry and more hostile towards the Romanian political establishment and the Romanian state than they ever have been before because of the Georgescu intrigue.
We have analyzed the situation. I would like to question you a little bit now, Peyton. As an American living here in Romania for the past 6 months, how do you view Crin Antonescu's chances?
Antonescu has made very meaningful overtures towards the Hungarian community here in Romania.
But is he strong enough in the Romanian community? Because that would bring him the majority of the votes.
I think, having talked to a lot of people here, not just Hungarians, but also Romanians I've met, there's a kind of widely held perception that Antonescu is not very charismatic. He's maybe a competent politician, would be a competent president, but he doesn't have the sort of personal connection with the voters that we see in other candidates. Certainly that Simeon enjoys with his base. There's a very loving relationship there. Nicu Jordan enjoys a lot of support and enthusiasm from younger people and progressives. And with Antonescu, we just don't really see that same level of intimacy between the voters and the politicians.
So do you think that it's going to be very difficult to bring out the base of those three governing parties to vote?
I think it's quite possible. I think it's quite possible that there's just a sort of lack of enthusiasm for his candidacy. I think that could really hurt turnout in the long run for them. The way he's sort of framing his candidacy as just a vote for the establishment, a vote for continuing just straight ahead, for maintaining the current political course that the country's had. And I think a lot of public opinion has sort of drifted away from the public wants something different right now, it seems to me. So this could be a challenge for them.
Some years ago, we have had a similar situation when one of the far-right candidates, Corneliu Vadim Tudor, qualified for the second round. And he was running against the incumbent Romanian president, Ion Iliescu, who was not liked at all at that moment in time. But in the second round, he won with something like 70-75% of the votes, because he was the least worst thing.
For all the love and support that Simeon enjoys from his base, I think probably to an equal degree, there's a lot of people are disgusted with him. A lot of people don't care for his brand of politics at all. So he's really a very divisive figure in that sense. And I could imagine maybe if Antonescu advances to the second round, I could imagine huge, swaths of Romanians basically kind of rallying around him to block Simeon. So it's really hard to say.
If you look at the base of Nicu Jordan, who is the mayor of Bucharest, I think that kind of base, that kind of people are the most afraid of George Simeon's rise. So they would hold their noses and vote for anybody else than George Simeon.
Right. It's easy to imagine a lot of Nicu Jordan's base kind of rallying behind Antonescu and supporting him.
And this would be true the other way around as well, I think.
Yeah, I think also. I think I could imagine a lot of Antonescu voters voting for Nicu Jordan in the second round. So it's a very interesting landscape, and I think that fight for second place is going to be really. I think there's going to be lots of movement there in the coming weeks. I think a lot of movement back and forth in the polls. So yeah, it's just something that we're going to have to keep our eye on here.
We hope that we helped you a little bit to understand the Romanian political spectrum. And if you are interested in this subject, stay tuned. We are going to come back with other dispatches, most probably after the Romanian presidential elections, just to understand what went on. And we will going to help you with new insight into the questions. Thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.